Hyunwoo Park looked out the window of his small room and watched the gas giant slowly spin below. The huge planet was orange and red with swirling clouds that looked like paint mixed together. He had been at Kepler Station Academy for 3 weeks now, and he still could not believe he was really here. The Academy was a massive space station that orbited the gas giant in the Vega system. Students from dozens of different alien species came here to learn together. Hyunwoo was the first human ever to join the exchange program. Back on Earth, everyone said he was lucky. His professors told him this chance would never come again. His parents were proud, but worried about sending their son so far from home. Hyunwoo was 22 years old and studied agricultural engineering at Seoul National University. He loved growing things and making plants thrive in difficult places. When the Galactic Educational Consortium offered the first human exchange spot, his professors recommended him right away. They said his practical approach to problem-solving would serve him well among alien students. The alien students at the Academy were nothing like the movies back on Earth. His roommate was Kira, a being made of living crystal from the ice moons around Proxima Centauri. Kira looked like a walking diamond that caught light and threw rainbows on the walls. She was always cold, even when the room temperature felt normal to Hyunwoo. Kira had to wear special heating pads just to stay comfortable. In his study group, there was Vex, who came from an ocean world. Vex had blue skin that you could see through, like looking at someone underwater. He needed to keep his skin wet all the time, so he carried a spray bottle and used it every few minutes. Vex was incredibly smart with mathematics and could solve equations in his head that would take Hyunwoo hours with a calculator. Then there was Torvin, who looked like a walking boulder with arms and legs. Torvin came from a world with heavy gravity where his people evolved from rock formations. He spoke by making his body vibrate, which created musical sounds. It took Hyunwoo weeks to understand that different tones meant different words. Torvin was studying geology and could tell you the mineral content of any rock just by touching it. The smallest member of their group was Nia, who looked like a praying mantis, but with 4 arms instead of 2. She had huge compound eyes that could see colors Hyunwoo could not even imagine. Nia came from a desert world where her people had built huge underground cities. She was incredibly fast with her hands and could take notes on 4 different subjects at the same time. All of these students were incredibly smart and came from civilizations thousands of years more advanced than Earth. Their homework assignments involved technologies that humans had only dreamed about. Hyunwoo often felt like a caveman trying to keep up with space-age geniuses. The hardest class was Extreme Environment Survival, taught by Professor Zelak. Professor Zelak was a saurian, which meant he looked like a huge lizard that walked on 2 legs. He had green scales, yellow eyes, and teeth that could probably bite through metal. Zelak had been teaching survival for over 200 years and had personally visited some of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Survival is not about technology, Professor Zelak would tell the class in his deep, gravelly voice. Technology fails. Equipment breaks. Intelligence alone will not save you when the environment wants you dead. Survival is about adaptation. It is about understanding that you are a guest in places that do not want you there. Professor Zelak had fought in 3 interstellar wars and explored dozens of uninhabitable worlds. The walls of his classroom were covered with pictures of planets where he had nearly died. There were ice worlds where the temperature dropped to -200 degrees. There were gas giants where the pressure would crush a normal being instantly. There were radioactive wastelands where the very air would kill you in minutes. But the picture that drew the most attention was a simple photo of red sand dunes under two bright suns. This was Xerion 7, which most species called the graveyard. Professor Zelak would point to this picture when he wanted to make students pay attention. For 3,000 years, explorers from 47 different species have tried to survive on Xerion 7, he would say. The desert there has killed every single one of them. The heat is beyond what most life forms can tolerate. The sandstorms carry toxins that will shut down your breathing. There is no water anywhere on the entire planet. The mineral content in the soil will poison you if you try to grow food. The gravity is 30% higher than galactic standard, which will break your bones if you are not careful. One day, near the end of the semester, Professor Zelak made an announcement that made everyone in the class go silent. "Your final examination will be a solo survival mission," he said, his yellow eyes scanning the room. "Each of you will spend 30 days alone on Xerion 7. You will have basic emergency equipment, but you must provide your own food, water, and shelter. This is not a simulation. This is not a safe training exercise. This is real, and it is dangerous." Kira made a sound like crystal wind chimes breaking. Vex turned a darker shade of blue, which Hyun-woo had learned meant he was scared. Torvin's vibrations became low and worried sounding. Nia's compound eyes widened until they looked like dinner plates. "Professor," Vex said, his voice shaking a little, "surely you do not expect all species to attempt this? Some of us are not built for desert survival." Professor Zelak nodded slowly. "You are correct. This examination is optional for off-world species who are not adapted for extreme heat environments. This is especially true for species that have never encountered desert conditions." His yellow eyes fixed on Hyun-woo. "The human, for instance, comes from a water-rich world with moderate temperatures. His species has soft skin that burns easily and limited heat tolerance. It would be irresponsible to require him to attempt this mission." All of Hyun-woo's classmates turned to look at him. He could see relief in their eyes. They thought he would take the easy way out, accept the exemption, and do some alternative assignment instead. After all, humans were the newest species in the galactic community. Everyone knew that Earth was a soft, easy world compared to the harsh planets where other species had evolved. But Hyun-woo surprised everyone by raising his hand. "Professor Zelak," he said calmly, "I would like to attempt the examination." See, classroom went completely silent. Even Professor Zelak looked surprised. "Are you certain, human?" Professor Zelak asked. "I have reviewed the biological data on your species. Humans have never demonstrated the ability to survive in extreme desert conditions without significant technological support. The mortality rate for carbon-based life forms on Xerion 7 is 97.3%. Hyun-woo smiled. "I am certain, Professor. I would like to try." Professor Zelak stared at him for a long moment, then made a note on his tablet. "Very well, but I will have emergency extraction teams standing by. The moment your vital signs show distress, we will pull you out immediately." After class, Hyun-woo's friends gathered around him in the hallway. "Are you crazy?" Kira asked, her crystal body flashing with worried colors. "That planet will kill you in hours." "My calculations show less than 3% chance of survival for any carbon-based life form," Nia said, all four of her hands moving as she worked on her tablet. "For humans specifically, the chance drops to less than 1%. The heat alone will cook your soft tissue." Torvin vibrated in concerned tones. "Your bones are too light for the gravity. Your skin has no protection against radiation. Vex sprayed himself with water and shook his head. Hyun-woo, this is not worth dying for. Take the alternative assignment. There is no shame in recognizing your limitations. But Hyun-woo just smiled and patted Vex on his damp shoulder. Do not worry about me, he said. I have some ideas. What his alien friends did not know was that Hyun-woo had grown up on his grandfather's farm in the countryside outside Seoul. His grandfather had taught him old farming techniques, how to find water in dry places, and how to make plants grow in soil that seemed impossible. His family had also taken vacations to some of Earth's harshest deserts. Hyun-woo had spent weeks in the Sahara, the Gobi, and the Atacama Desert. He had a feeling that Zerion 7 might not be as impossible as everyone thought. At least he hoped he was right. The next 3 weeks at the academy became the busiest time in Hyun-woo's life. While his classmates spent every waking hour studying survival manuals and testing advanced equipment, Hyun-woo took a completely different approach to preparing. For Zerion 7, Kira spent her days in the environmental simulation chambers, testing different types of cooling suits and thermal regulators. She practiced moving in heavy protective gear that would keep her crystal body from overheating and cracking under the desert suns. Her room was filled with backup power cells, emergency cooling packs, and enough ice-making equipment to stock a restaurant. Vex focused on water conservation technology. He studied advanced filtration systems that could pull moisture from the air and recycling units that could purify any liquid. His preparation area looked like a laboratory, with tubes and filters and machines that hummed quietly as they processed water samples. He calculated exactly how much liquid he would need each day to keep his skin from drying out completely. Torvin worked with gravity simulation equipment, practicing how to move his heavy body in the stronger gravitational field of Zerion 7, his. People were used to high gravity, but Zerion 7 was extreme even for them. He tested different types of support braces and learned how to distribute his weight to avoid stress fractures in his rock-like body. Nia approached the challenge like a military operation. She created detailed charts showing wind patterns, temperature, variations, and optimal shelter locations based on satellite data of Zerion 7. Her 4 arms worked constantly, writing notes, running calculations, and organizing supplies. She had backup plans for her backup plans, with contingency strategies for 17 different emergency scenarios. All of his friends tried to convince Hyun-woo to prepare the same way they were. They showed him catalogs of environmental suits that could regulate body temperature and atmospheric processors that could create breathable air. They offered to share their advanced water purification systems and emergency shelters that could withstand sandstorms. But Hyun-woo politely declined all their offers. Instead, he spent his time in the Academy's database, reading about Earth's desert environments and traditional survival techniques. He studied how the Bedouin people lived in the Sahara Desert and how Aboriginal Australians found water in the outback. He read about plants that could grow in extremely dry conditions and animals that could survive without water for months. His friends thought he was making a terrible mistake. Hyun-woo, Kira said one evening as she watched him reading. Old agricultural journals, you cannot survive a death world using primitive techniques. You need modern technology. You need proper equipment. The failure rate on Zerion 7 is not because people lack information, Vex added, spraying himself with his water bottle. It is because the environment is beyond what biological systems can handle. You need artificial life support. Torvin's vibrations were low and worried. The beings who died on that planet were not stupid. They had advanced technology. They had centuries of survival experience. They still died. Nia pulled up holographic displays showing the planet's statistics. The average surface temperature is 62 degrees Celsius during the day. The humidity is less than 2%. The atmospheric pressure is 18% higher than galactic standard. These are not conditions that organic life can adapt to, but Hyunwoo kept researching Earth's deserts. He learned that some places on his home planet were just as hot as Zarion 7 was supposed to be. The Dashti Lut Desert in Iran regularly reached temperatures over 70 degrees Celsius. Death Valley in California had recorded ground temperatures of over 80 degrees. Humans had not only survived in these places, but some had lived there for generations. While his classmates packed their bags with technological marvels, Hyunwoo's preparation looked almost primitive by comparison. He requested seeds from Earth, plants that grew well in hot, dry conditions. He packed a small toolkit with simple hand tools that his grandfather had taught him to use. He brought basic camping equipment that looked ancient compared to his friend's high-tech gear. The most important things he packed were items that made his friends shake their heads in confusion. He brought several tubes of sunscreen, which none of the other species had ever heard of. He packed salt tablets and electrolyte powder. He brought a simple water purification tablet that could fit in his pocket. He even packed a wide-brimmed hat that looked like something a farmer would wear. "What is that white cream?" Kira asked, examining the sunscreen tube. "It protects human skin from radiation damage," Hyunwoo explained. "We use it when we spend time in bright sunlight." Vex looked confused. "But surely your skin is naturally protected against radiation. Otherwise, how do you survive on your home planet?" "Human skin burns easily," Hyunwoo said. "But it also tans and becomes more resistant to heat and radiation over time. It is an adaptation mechanism." This information seemed to surprise his friends. Most alien species either had natural protection against environmental hazards or they did not. The idea that biological systems could adapt and improve over time was not something they had considered. Professor Zelak called Hyunwoo to his office 2 days before departure. The Saurian professor looked even more serious than usual, his yellow eyes studying the human carefully. "I have reviewed your preparation strategy," Professor Zelak said, his deep voice filling the small office. "I must tell you that I am concerned. Your equipment list contains no environmental protection systems, no atmospheric processors, no emergency life support. You are planning to attempt survival on one of the galaxy's most dangerous planets, using equipment that my ancestors might have considered primitive." Hyunwoo sat calmly in the chair across from Professor Zelak's desk. "I understand your concern, Professor, but I believe that simple solutions are sometimes more reliable than complex ones. Advanced technology can fail. Basic techniques that have worked for thousands of years are more dependable." Professor Zelak leaned back in his chair. "You do realize that I will be monitoring your vital signs constantly. The moment I detect any sign of distress, I will abort your mission and extract you immediately. I will not allow a student to die on my watch, especially not the first human to attempt this examination." "I understand, Professor," Hyunwoo replied. "But I think you might be surprised by how adaptable humans can be." The day of departure arrived, quickly. The transport ship was a sleek vessel designed for deploying students to dangerous worlds. It had medical facilities, emergency extraction systems, and enough firepower to blast through a sandstorm if necessary to reach a student in trouble. Hyunwoo's friends gathered at the docking bay to see him off. They all looked worried, and some of them had tears in their eyes. Even though they came from different species and different worlds, they had become close friends over the past months. "Promise us you will activate your emergency beacon if things get bad," Kira said, her crystal body flickering with anxious colors. Do not try to prove anything, Vex added, his blue skin darker than usual with worry. Survival is more important than pride. Torvin's vibrations were gentle and caring. Remember that courage is not about taking unnecessary risks. It is about knowing when to ask for help. Nia handed him a small device. I programmed this with optimal shelter coordinates based on my analysis of the terrain. Please use it if you need to find the safest locations. Hyunwoo accepted the device gratefully and hugged each of his friends goodbye. Do not worry about me, he said with a smile. I will see you all in 30 days. The transport ship left Kepler Station and began the 3-day journey to Zarion 7. Hyunwoo spent the time reviewing his plans and checking his simple equipment one more time. The other students on the ship were from advanced species that had attempted the examination before. They looked at his basic gear with expressions that clearly said they thought he was going to die. When the ship reached Zarion 7, Hyunwoo got his first look at the planet through the viewport. It was a world of red sand and rock formations under twin suns that blazed like angry eyes. There were no clouds, no signs of water, no green vegetation anywhere. It looked exactly like what it was called, a graveyard. The ship's captain, a veteran, Saurian named Commander Rask, personally briefed each student before deployment. Remember, Commander Rask said when it was Hyunwoo's turn, your emergency beacon will bring help within 6 hours. Do not hesitate to use it. There is no shame in calling for extraction. The only shame is in dying stupidly. Hyunwoo nodded and checked his beacon one more time. Then he climbed into his individual drop pod, a small capsule that would deliver him safely to the planet's surface. As the pod sealed shut around him, Hyunwoo could hear the voice of the ship's medical officer through the communication system. All vital signs normal, the medic reported. Human physiology appears stable. Initiating drop sequence in 10 seconds. Hyunwoo felt the pod detach from the ship and begin its descent through Zarion 7's atmosphere. Through the small window, he watched the red desert grow larger and larger below him. Soon, he would find out if his confidence in human adaptability was justified, or if he was about to become the latest victim of the planet that had killed explorers for 3,000 years. The drop pod hit the red sand of Zarion 7 with a solid thump that rattled Hyunwoo's teeth. For a moment, he sat still inside the protective capsule, listening to the hiss of the cooling systems and the distant howl of wind across the desert. Then the pod's door opened with a sharp click, and the heat of the alien world hit him like opening an oven door. Hyunwoo stepped out onto the surface of Zarion 7 and took his first breath of the planet's air. It was hot and dry, filled with the smell of minerals and ancient dust. The twin suns blazed overhead like two giant spotlights, casting his shadow in 2 different directions across the endless red dunes. He pulled out his communication device and made his first report to Professor Zelak. This is Hyunwoo Park, Day 1, Hour 1, he said into the device. I have landed safely in Grid Section 7. The drop pod systems are functioning normally. Environmental conditions are as expected. Beginning initial exploration in sight. Assessment. What Hyunwoo did not mention in his report was what he was thinking as he looked around at the deadly desert. The temperature was hot, certainly, but he had experienced similar heat during summer visits to his uncle's farm in southern Korea. The air was dry, but not much drier than some places he had been in Mongolia. The gravity felt heavy, but not uncomfortably so. Most importantly, this did not feel like a death world to him. It felt like a very hot, very dry place that needed to be approached with respect and intelligence. The first thing Hyun-woo did was something that would have horrified his classmates and probably given Professor Zelak a heart attack. He took off his shirt. Standing shirtless under the twin suns of an alien world, Hyun-woo applied sunscreen to his exposed skin methodically and carefully. He had learned from his grandfather that the key to surviving in hot places was not to fight the heat, but to work with it. Heavy clothing and artificial cooling systems made you dependent on technology. Better to let your body adapt naturally, while protecting it from damage. Next, he studied the landscape around his landing site. The red sand was not uniform like he had expected. There were areas where the grains were fine and soft, and other areas where they were coarse and mixed, with small rocks. Some of the dunes showed signs of regular wind patterns, while others looked more stable. About half a kilometer from his landing site, Hyun-woo spotted something that made him smile, a depression in the sand that was darker than the surrounding area. His grandfather had taught him to recognize signs of underground water, and this looked promising. Walking across the sand toward the depression, Hyun-woo felt the heat building up in his body. But instead of becoming uncomfortable, he found that his skin was starting to sweat properly, which helped cool him down. This was exactly how human thermoregulation was supposed to work. His body was already beginning to adapt to the environment. The depression turned out to be even better than he had hoped. It was a natural bowl in the landscape where harder rock came close to the surface. More importantly, when Hyun-woo dug down just a few centimeters with his hands, the sand became slightly damp. Using the small shovel from his kit, he began digging a deeper hole. At about 1 meter down, he hit a layer of rock that was definitely moist. Not flowing water, but enough moisture to work with. Hyun-woo set up his first piece of advanced technology. A simple solar still. It was nothing more than a clear plastic sheet stretched over a hole in the ground with a collection cup in the center. The sun would heat the moist sand, causing water to evaporate and condense on the plastic, then drip into the cup. It was a technique that humans had been using for decades in Earth's deserts. While the solar still began its slow work, Hyun-woo explored the area around his campsite. What he found surprised him even more than the presence of underground moisture. Growing in small clusters among the rocks were plants that looked remarkably similar to earth succulents. They had thick, waxy leaves designed to store water and protect against heat damage. When he carefully cut into one of the leaves, clear liquid leaked out. He tasted it cautiously. It was slightly bitter but not toxic. This discovery was remarkable for several reasons. First, it meant that Zerion 7 was not completely lifeless as everyone believed. Second, the presence of plant life suggested that the soil and atmosphere could support biological processes. Third, if these plants could survive here, it was possible that Earth plants might be able to as well. By the end of his first day, Hyun-woo had established a basic camp in the depression where he had found water. He used his emergency blankets to create a simple shelter that would provide shade during the day and retain heat during the night. His solar still was already producing small amounts of clean water. He had identified several types of edible plants in the immediate area. Most importantly, he felt good. His skin had turned slightly pink from sun exposure, but the sunscreen had prevented any serious burning. His body was adjusting to the heat, and dehydration was not a problem thanks to his water collection system. That evening, he made his second report to Professor Zelak. "Day 1, evening report," he said. "I have established a base camp near a suitable water source. Environmental adaptation is proceeding normally. I have identified local flora that appears to be edible. No equipment failures to report. Morale is high. What Hyunwoo did not know was that his calm, confident reports were causing quite a stir back at the academy. His alien classmates were gathered around Professor Zelak's monitoring station, watching Hyunwoo's vital signs with amazement. His core temperature is elevated but stable, Nia reported, checking the data streams. His hydration levels are actually improving. His stress hormones are lower than they were during our regular classes. This makes no sense, Vex said, his blue skin pale with confusion. According to our environmental models, he should be experiencing severe heat stroke by now. His soft human skin should be severely damaged from radiation exposure. Kira's crystal body flickered with puzzled colors. The atmospheric readings show temperatures that would kill most carbon-based life forms within hours. How is he not only surviving, but apparently thriving? Torvin's vibrations were deep and thoughtful. Perhaps we have underestimated human adaptability. Their species evolved on a world with extreme environmental variations. They may be more resilient than we assumed. Professor Zelak studied the monitoring displays with growing interest. In over 200 years of teaching survival courses, he had never seen vital signs like these from a student on Zerion 7. Every other being who had attempted this examination had shown immediate signs of environmental stress. Their heart rates increased, their breathing became labored, their body chemistry showed clear indicators of biological systems under severe strain. But Hyunwoo's readings looked like he was taking a pleasant walk in a park. Over the next 6 days, Hyunwoo's reports continued to confound everyone who heard them. Each day, he sounded more confident and comfortable. His daily discoveries included new water sources, additional edible plants, and even small animals that he observed but did not disturb. On day 3, he reported finding mineral deposits that would be excellent for plant nutrition. On day 4, he successfully tested growing some of his earth seeds in the Zerion 7 soil. On day 5, he built an improved shelter that was actually comfortable during both the blazing heat of day and the surprising cold of night. By day 6, he was reporting that his vacation was going better than he had expected. Meanwhile, his classmates were not faring as well in their own survival attempts. Emergency extraction signals began coming in from their locations across the planet. Kira was the first to call for help. Her cooling systems were overwhelmed by the constant heat, and her crystal structure was beginning to develop stress fractures. She was extracted on day 4 with severe thermal damage that would take weeks to heal. Vex lasted until day 5 before his water recycling systems could not keep up with his body's needs. Despite carrying enough filtration equipment to supply a small base, he was suffering from dehydration and skin damage when the emergency teams reached him. Torvin made it to day 6, but the combination of heat stress and gravitational strain caused hairline cracks in his rock-like body. The emergency medical team found him barely conscious and unable to move safely. Naya, despite all her careful planning and backup systems, was forced to activate her emergency beacon on day 7 when a sandstorm damaged her shelter and contaminated her water supplies. One by one, the advanced alien students were failing the examination that the primitive human was not only passing but seemed to be enjoying. Professor Zelak found himself in the unprecedented situation of having only one student left on Zerion 7, and that student was the one he had been most worried about. On day 7, Hyunwoo's evening report contained news that made Professor Zelak question everything he thought he knew about survival in extreme environments. Day 7, evening report, Hyunwoo said, and Professor Zelak could hear the smile in his voice. Water production is exceeding consumption. Food sources are adequate and expanding. I have successfully germinated several earth plant varieties in local soil. Weather conditions remain stable. I am beginning to understand why some species might find this environment challenging, but I must say that I am quite comfortable here. Looking forward to the next 3 weeks. By the beginning of his second week on Zarian 7, Hyunwoo had settled into a comfortable daily routine that would have seemed impossible to any other species in the galaxy. He woke each morning before the twin suns rose above the horizon, when the air was cool and the red sand was pleasant under his bare feet. His morning routine started with checking his solar stills, which now numbered 5 and produced more water than he could drink in a day. The excess water went into storage containers he had crafted from materials in his survival kit and natural clay deposits he had discovered near his camp. Next, he tended to his garden. What had started as a simple experiment with a few earth seeds had become something extraordinary. The red soil of Zarion 7, which was supposed to be toxic to most life forms, turned out to be incredibly rich in minerals that earth plants loved. The constant sunlight from 2 suns meant that photosynthesis happened at an accelerated rate. The low humidity actually helped prevent many of the fungal diseases that normally plagued crops. His watermelon plants were thriving beyond anything he had ever seen on Earth. The vines spread across the sand in thick, healthy tangles. The leaves were dark green and waxy, perfectly adapted to the intense sunlight. Most amazingly, the watermelons themselves were growing to enormous sizes, fed by the mineral-rich soil and constant solar energy. The tomato plants were equally successful, producing fruit that was sweeter and more flavorful than anything from Earth. The peppers had adapted so well that they were actually developing new varieties, with some becoming milder and others more intensely spicy in response to the alien environment. Hyunwoo documented everything carefully in his daily reports, but he could tell that the people monitoring him from the academy thought he was exaggerating or possibly suffering from heat-induced hallucinations. Day 10 morning report, he said into his communication device while sitting in the shade of his expanded shelter. Agricultural experiments continue to exceed expectations. Watermelon specimens are reaching maturity ahead of schedule and are significantly larger than Earth normal. Tomato yield is approximately 300% above standard Earth garden. Productivity. I am considering whether to request permission to extend my stay beyond the required 30 days. That last comment caused quite a reaction back at the academy. Professor Zelak called an emergency faculty meeting to discuss what to do about their human student who appeared to be treating a deadly survival examination like a pleasant camping trip. His vital signs remain completely stable, reported Dr. Keth, the Academy's chief medical officer. In fact, many of his biological markers are actually improving. His bone density has increased due to the higher gravity. His cardiovascular efficiency is up 12%. His vitamin D levels are the highest we have ever recorded for any species. But this is impossible, protested Professor Vane, who taught xenobiology. Zarian 7 has killed explorers from species far more advanced than humans, beings with natural environmental protections, creatures evolved specifically for high-temperature survival. How can a soft-skinned mammal from a moderate climate world not only survive but flourish there? Professor Zelak studied the data streams from Hyunwoo's monitoring equipment. Perhaps we have been approaching this world with incorrect assumptions. We assumed that Zarian 7 was hostile to life because it killed the explorers we sent there. But what if those explorers were simply not adapted for this type of environment? Meanwhile, on Zarian 7, Hyun Woo was making discoveries that supported Professor Zelak's theory. During his second week, he began exploring further from his base camp, hiking across the Red Desert to see what else this supposedly dead world had to offer. What he found was a landscape that was harsh but far from lifeless. In rocky areas where water collected during occasional storms, there were entire ecosystems of plants and small animals that had learned to thrive in the extreme environment. Most of these life forms were tiny and well camouflaged, which explained why orbital surveys had missed them. There were lizard-like creatures no bigger than his thumb that could survive for months without water. There were insects that looked like living jewels, their shells reflecting the intense sunlight to stay cool. There were even small mammals that looked like a cross between mice and prairie dogs, living in underground burrows connected by tunnel systems that stayed cool even. During the hottest part of the day, the more Hyun Woo explored, the more he realized that Zarian 7 was not a death world at all. It was simply a world that required different survival strategies than most galactic species were prepared for. On day 14, he made a discovery that changed everything. While hiking toward some interesting rock formations about 3 kilometers, from his camp, Hyun Woo noticed something glinting in a small canyon between 2 red stone ridges. When he climbed down to investigate, he found a natural spring. The spring was small, producing only a few liters of water per hour, but the water was clean, cool, and perfectly drinkable. More importantly, the area around the spring was like a hidden oasis. There were large trees growing there, their roots reaching deep into the rock to access underground water sources. There were flowering plants that attracted colorful flying insects. There was even grass. Hyun Woo realized that he had found proof that Zarian 7 could support not just survival, but comfortable long-term habitation for species that knew how to work with the environment instead of fighting against it. That evening, his report to the Academy contained information that made Professor Zelak seriously consider launching a full scientific expedition to the planet. Day 14. Evening report, Hyun Woo said, his voice filled with excitement. I have discovered a natural spring approximately 3 kilometers north-northeast of base camp. The water source appears to be permanent and supports a thriving local ecosystem. I am beginning to suspect that Zarian 7 has been mischaracterized as uninhabitable. With proper techniques, this world could support permanent settlement. The response from Professor Zelak came within an hour, which was unusually fast for official. Academy Communications. Student Park. Professor Zelak's voice crackled through the device. Your reports are being reviewed by the Galactic Environmental Assessment Board. Please document everything you discover with the highest possible detail. Your findings may require us to completely revise our classification of Zarian 7. What Professor Zelak did not tell Hyun Woo was that representatives from a dozen different species had contacted the Academy requesting copies of his survival techniques. Agricultural specialists from 3 different star systems wanted samples of his impossible crops. The Galactic Colonization Authority was already discussing whether humans might be suitable for settlement missions to worlds that other species had written off as uninhabitable. Back on Zarian 7, Hyun Woo was oblivious to the stir his success was causing. He was too busy enjoying what he had come to think of as the best vacation he had ever taken. His daily routine now included a morning hike to the spring, where he would refill his water containers and check on the local wildlife. The small animals there had become accustomed to his presence and no longer fled when he approached. Some of the bird-like creatures had even started following him around, apparently curious about this strange new addition to their ecosystem, his garden continued to thrive beyond all expectations. The watermelons were now so large that he could barely lift them. The tomatoes were producing more fruit than he could possibly eat. He had even managed to grow some of the local plants in his garden, creating hybrid growing areas where earth crops and Xarian 7 native species grew side by side. The heat that was supposed to kill him had become so comfortable that he often worked shirtless under the twin suns, his skin now tanned to a deep brown that protected him from radiation damage. The gravity that was supposed to break his bones had made him stronger and more stable on his feet. Most remarkably, Hyunwoo had begun to love the alien beauty of Xarian 7. The way the red sand looked like flowing blood at sunset. The way the twin suns created double rainbows in the mineral dust. The way the rock formations changed color throughout the day as the light shifted. On day 16, he made another discovery that proved just how much the supposedly hostile world had accepted him. While working in his garden, he noticed that some of the local animals were beginning to visit his camp. The tiny lizards came to drink from his water collection system. The jewel-bright insects pollinated his earth plants, creating new hybrid varieties. Even some of the small mammals had started building burrows near his shelter, apparently recognizing his camp as a safe and prosperous place. Hyunwoo realized that he had not just survived on Xarian 7. He had become part of its ecosystem. That evening, as he sat watching the twin suns set over his thriving garden while small alien creatures played in the sand around his feet, Hyunwoo wondered if 30 days would be nearly enough time to explore everything this amazing world had to offer. He was already planning to ask Professor Zelak if he could extend his stay. The third week on Xarian 7 brought changes that Hyunwoo could never have imagined when he first stepped out of his drop pod onto the red sand. What had started as a simple survival exercise had transformed into something approaching a small, agricultural miracle. His garden now covered nearly half a hectare of the depression where he had made his camp. The watermelon vines had spread in thick, healthy tangles across the mineral-rich sand, their deep green leaves creating patches of shade where other plants could grow. The watermelons themselves had reached sizes that defied everything Hyunwoo thought he knew about agriculture. The largest watermelon was nearly 2 meters long and probably weighed over 100 kilograms. Its skin was thick and waxy, perfectly adapted to retain moisture in the dry environment. When Hyunwoo cut into it to test ripeness, the flesh inside was deep red, incredibly sweet, and contained more water than any earth watermelon he had ever tasted. But the watermelons were only the beginning of what Xarian 7's unique environment could produce. His tomato plants had grown into small trees, their thick trunks supporting heavy branches loaded with fruit. The tomatoes ranged from normal, earth sizes to specimens that were larger than his head. The flavor was intense and complex, with the mineral-rich soil adding notes that no earth tomato had ever possessed. The pepper plants had evolved into varieties that would have amazed botanists back home. Some produced fruit so mild they could be eaten like apples. Others had developed heat levels that made the spiciest earth peppers seem tame by comparison. A few had even started producing peppers in colors that did not exist in nature on Earth, deep purples and brilliant blues that caught the light of the twin suns like living jewels. Most remarkably, Hyunwoo had successfully cultivated some of the native Xarian 7 plants alongside his earth crops. The local succulents had cross-pollinated with his vegetables, creating hybrid species that combined the best traits of both worlds. These new plants were even better adapted to the desert environment while maintaining the nutritional value and taste of earth food. On day 19, Hyunwoo made a discovery that would change everything anyone in the galaxy thought they knew about agriculture in extreme environments. While checking his newest garden expansion near the natural spring, he had discovered. He found that some of his plants had begun producing seeds that were genetically different from their Earth parents. The twin suns and unique mineral content of Zerion 7 had actually accelerated evolution, causing his crops to adapt and improve at a rate that should have taken thousands of years. These new seeds, when planted, grew into plants that were bigger, stronger, and more productive than anything that had ever existed on Earth. They required less water, could tolerate higher temperatures, and produced more food per plant than traditional varieties. Hyunwoo realized that he had accidentally created new species of food plants that could potentially feed populations on worlds that were previously considered too harsh for agriculture. His daily reports to the Academy had become increasingly enthusiastic, but he could tell that the people monitoring him were having trouble believing what he was telling them. Day 20, morning report, he said, while sitting in the shade of a tomato tree, eating a breakfast of fresh vegetables that would have been impossible according to every agricultural expert in the galaxy. Crop yields continue to exceed all projections. I have documented 17 new plant varieties that appear to be evolutionary adaptations to local conditions. Water production now exceeds consumption by approximately 400%. I have begun preserving seeds for transport back to the Academy. I believe we may have discovered something quite significant here. What Hyunwoo did not know was that his reports were being studied by agricultural scientists from dozens of worlds. The Galactic Food Production Council had declared his findings too important to ignore, despite their apparent impossibility. 3 different universities had requested permission to send research teams to Zerion 7 to verify his claims. Professor Zelak found himself in the unusual position of having to defend the credibility of a student whose achievements seemed to violate known laws of biology and physics. I have monitored thousands of survival exercises over 2 centuries, Professor Zelak told the assembled faculty council. I have never seen anything like this. Student Park is not just surviving on Zerion 7. He has created a thriving agricultural settlement using primitive techniques that our most advanced species would consider laughably inadequate. Dr. Keth, the Academy's medical officer, pulled up holographic displays showing Hyunwoo's vital signs. His biological markers indicate that he is healthier now than when he began the exercise. His muscle mass has increased. His bone density is up 18%. His immune system is functioning at levels we have never recorded for any species. Most remarkably, his skin has developed natural protection against radiation that exceeds anything we can create artificially. But how is this possible? Demanded Professor Vane. Zerion 7 killed trained explorers with centuries of experience and advanced life support systems. How can one human with basic equipment not only survive but flourish there? Professor Zelak considered the question carefully. I believe we have been making a fundamental error in our approach to extreme environment survival. We have relied on technology to protect us from hostile conditions instead of learning to adapt to them. Humans appear to have retained biological plasticity that most species have lost through dependence on artificial environmental controls. Meanwhile, on Zerion 7, Hyunwoo was discovering just how much his body had adapted to the alien environment. The heat that had initially required careful management with sunscreen and shade now felt comfortable and energizing. He could work under the direct light of both suns for hours without fatigue. His skin had developed a deep, even tan that protected. him from radiation while allowing him to absorb beneficial minerals from the sunlight. The higher gravity that was supposed to stress his skeleton had made him stronger and more stable. The low humidity that should have dehydrated him had taught his body to conserve water more efficiently. Even his sleep patterns had adapted to the planet's 26-hour day cycle without any difficulty. On day 22, Hyunwoo received a communication from Professor Zelak that surprised him. "Student Park?" Professor Zelak's voice came through the device with unusual formality. "Your examination results have attracted attention from the highest levels of the Galactic Educational Consortium. Representatives from the Agricultural Development Board, the Colonial Assessment Authority, and the Environmental Sciences Institute have requested permission to visit Zarion 7 to observe your methods firsthand." Hyunwoo paused in his work of harvesting a particularly impressive batch of hybrid tomatoes. "Professor, I would be happy to show them around, but I should mention that my techniques are not really advanced. Most of what I am doing here, my grandfather could have taught to anyone." There was a long pause before Professor Zelak responded. "Student Park, your grandfather's knowledge may be more valuable than either of you realized. We are beginning to understand that there may be significant gaps in our approach to environmental adaptation. Your success on Zarion 7 suggests that biological flexibility may be more important than technological sophistication for survival in extreme conditions." That evening, as Hyunwoo sat beside his thriving garden, watching the twin suns set over the red desert, he reflected on how much his perspective had changed since arriving on Zarion 7. What the galaxy considered a death world, he had found to be a place of incredible beauty and opportunity. The impossible environment had become home to the most successful agricultural project he had ever undertaken. The deadly desert had provided everything he needed, not just to survive, but to prosper. Small animals from the local ecosystem had made permanent homes around his camp. The tiny lizards sunned themselves on his solar stills. The jewel-bright insects pollinated his hybrid plants. The mouse-like mammals had built an entire colony in the tunnels beneath his garden, apparently recognizing his settlement as a beneficial addition to their environment. Hyunwoo had become part of Zarion 7's ecosystem, and the planet had embraced him in return. On day 24, he made one final discovery that would ensure his examination results would be remembered for generations. While exploring a canyon system near the natural spring, Hyunwoo found evidence of ancient water channels carved into the rock. Following these channels led him to a series of underground caverns that contained vast aquifers of clean, fresh water. The discovery meant that Zarion 7 was not just capable of supporting small-scale agriculture. With proper development, it could potentially become a major agricultural world capable of feeding populations across multiple star systems. As he prepared his report on this final discovery, Hyunwoo smiled to himself. His 30-day survival examination was almost over, but he suspected that his relationship with Zarion 7 was just beginning. He had found something on this impossible world that no amount of advanced technology could provide, proof that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most powerful, and that nature's ability to adapt and thrive was stronger than any force in the galaxy. On day 30, the extraction ship appeared as a bright star in Zarion 7's red sky, growing larger as it descended through the atmosphere toward Hyunwoo's coordinates. Commander Rask and his crew had been monitoring the humans' impossible success for weeks, but they still expected to find either a corpse or a barely alive survivor requiring immediate medical evacuation. What they found instead challenged everything they thought they understood about survival in extreme environments. As the ship settled onto the sand near Hyunwoo's camp, Commander Rask and his medical team prepared their emergency equipment. They had extraction gurneys ready, medical stabilization systems powered up, and enough life support gear to handle any conceivable survival situation. But when the ship's doors opened and the crew stepped out into the blazing heat of the twin suns, they stopped in complete amazement. Hyunwoo was sitting comfortably in the shade of what could only be described as a thriving garden. He was deeply tanned, clearly healthy, and wearing a handmade hat woven from local plant fibers. Around him spread nearly half a hectare of green vegetation that should not have been able to exist on this supposedly barren world. Small animals moved freely through the garden. Colorful insects buzzed from plant to plant. A gentle breeze carried the scent of growing things and flowing water. If they had not known better, the extraction team would have thought they had landed in an oasis on some garden world instead of on the galaxy's most notorious death planet. "Commander Rask," Hyunwoo called out cheerfully, waving from beneath his plant fiber hat. "Perfect timing. I just finished harvesting this morning's crop. Would you and your crew like some fresh watermelon? I am afraid I grew far more than I can eat myself." Commander Rask, a veteran saurian who had conducted extractions from dozens of hostile worlds, found himself speechless. His medical officer, Dr. Thane, approached Hyunwoo with a scanner raised, clearly expecting to find signs of severe dehydration, heat stroke, or radiation poisoning. Instead, the scanner showed biological readings that made Dr. Thane check his equipment twice to make sure it was working properly. "Commander," Dr. Thane reported, his voice filled with confusion. "This human shows no signs of environmental stress. His hydration levels are optimal. His muscle mass has actually increased. His bone density is up 20% from baseline. His vitamin levels are higher than anything I have ever recorded." Hyunwoo stood up and brushed sand from his clothes, which looked like they had been repaired and modified using local materials. "I hope my friends back at the academy are doing well. I brought some gifts for them." He led the extraction team to an area near his shelter where he had prepared several large containers filled with seeds, dried foods, and samples of his hybrid plants. Most prominently displayed were 3 enormous watermelons, each one larger than anything the crew had ever seen. "These are from my garden," Hyunwoo explained proudly. "The soil here is incredibly rich in minerals that Earth plants love. The constant sunlight from both suns makes photosynthesis incredibly efficient. I think Kira will especially enjoy the flavor. These watermelons are much sweeter than anything we can grow on Earth." Commander Rask picked up one of the smaller watermelons, which still weighed nearly 50 kilograms. The fruit was perfectly ripe, with a thick skin that felt almost waxy to the touch. When he tapped it, it produced the deep, hollow sound that indicated optimal ripeness. "You grew this here?" Commander Rask asked. "On Zerion 7? "Oh, yes," Hyunwoo replied enthusiastically. "This soil is amazing for agriculture once you understand how to work with it. I have been thinking that this world could potentially support large-scale farming operations. The water sources are more abundant than initial surveys suggested, and the growing conditions are actually superior to many agricultural worlds I have read about." Dr. Thane was still staring at his scanner readings. "Sir, according to these biological markers, this human is healthier than when he started the examination. This is unprecedented in the history of Zerion 7 survival attempts." The extraction team spent an hour documenting Hyunwoo's camp, recording everything from his simple but effective water collection systems to his thriving agricultural plots. The crew members, all experienced in extreme environment operations, found themselves asking questions about techniques that seemed primitive but were clearly more effective than their advanced technology. "How did you protect yourself from the radiation?" asked the ship's engineer, a crystalline being similar to Kira. Hyun Woo held up a tube of sunscreen. "This is a simple chemical barrier that humans have used for decades. It prevents skin damage while allowing beneficial solar energy absorption. My body adapted to the radiation levels within the first week." "What about water procurement?" asked Dr. Thane. "Our surveys indicated no accessible water sources in this region." Hyunwoo showed them his solar stills and pointed toward the natural spring he had discovered. "Water is everywhere here if you know how to find it and collect it. These are techniques that humans have used in Earth's deserts for centuries." "But the heat," protested the engineer. "How did you survive temperatures that have killed beings with natural thermal protection?" Hyunwoo smiled and gestured to his tanned skin. "Human biology is more adaptable than most people realize. Instead of fighting the environment, I learned to work with it. My body adjusted naturally." When it was time to leave, Hyunwoo took one last look around his camp. The small animals that had become his neighbors gathered nearby, apparently sensing that their strange new friend was departing. Some of the tiny lizards had even climbed onto his shoulders, reluctant to let him go. "I will miss this place," Hyunwoo said quietly. "It has been the most peaceful and productive month of my life." The return journey to Kepler Station took 3 days, during which the extraction crew sent detailed reports to the Academy describing what they had found. By the time the ship docked at the station, representatives from a dozen different galactic organizations were waiting to meet the human who had not only survived Zerion 7, but had apparently turned it into a garden. Hyunwoo's friends were waiting in the docking bay, all of them showing signs of their own difficult experiences on the desert world. Kira's crystal structure still showed stress fractures from thermal damage. Vex's blue skin was paler than normal, and he carried an extra water supply. Torvin moved carefully, his rock-like body still healing from gravitational stress. Nia's compound eyes were covered with protective filters, and she seemed unusually quiet. When Hyunwoo emerged from the ship carrying containers of fresh fruit and vegetables, his friends gathered around him in amazement. "You look incredible," Kira said, her crystal body flickering with surprised colors. "You are healthier than when you left." "And tanned," Vex added, spraying himself with water. "How is your skin not burned away?" Hyunwoo smiled and began distributing slices of watermelon to his friends. "Try this," he said. "I think you will find it quite refreshing." Kira bit into the watermelon slice cautiously. Then her entire crystal structure lit up with pleasure. "This is delicious. The flavor is unlike anything I have ever tasted." "Where did you acquire this?" "I grew it," Hyunwoo said simply. "On Zerion 7. His friends stared at him in silence. Finally, Nia spoke up, her voice filled with confusion. "You grew food on the Death World?" "Zerion 7 is not a Death World," Hyunwoo replied, handing out more fruit. "It is just a very hot, very dry world that requires different techniques than most species are used to. Once you understand how to work with the environment instead of fighting it, it is actually quite hospitable." Professor Zelak approached the group, his yellow eyes studying Hyunwoo with an expression of professional fascination. "Student Park," Professor Zelak said formally, "your examination results have caused quite a stir in academic circles. The Galactic Educational Consortium has requested a complete review of our environmental classification systems. several agricultural worlds have inquired about hiring human consultants for desert reclamation projects. The Colonial Development Authority wishes to discuss the possibility of human settlement missions to worlds previously considered uninhabitable. Hyun-woo finished handing out watermelon slices and looked around at the assembled crowd of professors, officials, and students who had gathered to witness his return. "Professor Zelak," he said with a grin, "are there any other impossible worlds where I could do some extra credit work? Because I have to say, this has been the most interesting educational experience of my life." Professor Zelak's reptilian features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. "Student Park, I suspect that after today, you will have more opportunities to explore impossible worlds than you know what to do with." As the crowd dispersed and his friends continued to marvel over the impossible fruit from the death world, Hyun-woo looked out through the station's windows toward the stars. Somewhere out there were dozens of worlds that the galaxy had written off as uninhabitable. Worlds that might be waiting for someone with the right knowledge and the willingness to adapt. He was already planning his next adventure. Behind him, Kira, Vex, Torvin, and Nia continued eating watermelon and discussing the impossible things their human friend had accomplished. None of them fully understood how Hyun-woo had succeeded where so many others had failed.